What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the debut album by rapper Roddy Ricch. Basically, this project is called Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial, and it came out in the late fall of 2019. So this particular project barely feels like a 2010s album as far as those pitches going to happen. This was definitely a heralded type one just a few years ago. It's really not that many as far as those pitches going to happen, but enough to be able to talk about the COVID and pandemic era in retrospect. In the initial few moments like the COVID pandemic, the hit song The Box was like a very mammoth and megaton song that just dominated throughout most of 2020, or at least the first half of 2020 as far as those pitches going to happen. Just an interesting aspect. This particular album kind of started getting its buzz and wings around the fall of 2019, which was just kind of an awkward era around for like the times of rap music. Just in particular, I was paying more attention to things like Cut Calhoun and Broken Side and Deuce and some of those type folks that had to say around that time. But I look after, there were some folks popping around that particular time that were kind of within a relative. It was just, like I said, it was just a stranger type era because 2010's trap Future was not really as full blown dominating around that time. Meek Mill was not really dominating as much around that time. Folks were still kind of reeling off of the death of like Nipsey Hussle as far as those pitches going to happen. Some of those type of fairs. Like it was just kind of like the folks that were dominating was basically Lil Baby and Dub Baby as far as those pitches going to happen. But one of the third ones that was kind of a part of a trifecta for a decent while was Roddy Ricch. Now he's actually a younger cat. He's more of like a face like the new school. Originally I was thinking that he was born like 92, 93, but he was actually born in like 98 around those pitches. So I'd say some good type fair to kind of have him be like a face like the new school. Came up around the same time as Pop Smoke. Between I think him and Pop Smoke were like around neck and neck around this particular time in terms of like being the face, like full blown kind of new school. But strangely enough, Roddy Ricch does not drop that frequently. I'd have to say he's only dropped 2 albums up to this particular point, and I want to say he might have some EPs and mixtapes, but for the most part, this is probably about what gets the lion's share. I remember like supposedly his second album from 2021 kind of didn't necessarily get bad scores, but this was not seen as much of a mammoth as this particular one. This is definitely a notable album out of the late 2010s and early 2020s. I'd say just some good type of appeals. Damn near a classic. I'd say definitely going to get pretty damn close to like a classic type score just within the impact behind it. It's just very appreciable just within the aspect behind it. I like some of these dark acoustic type songs on here. Basically like Lil Baby's type tone with some of his 2017 mixtapes. Lil Baby's 2017 mixtapes just within the pitch of having something a little bit more just shrouded and just real makeshift ready. So this is a decent amount of pop rap on here, but it's just kind of the pitch when you talk about it, just kind of has the tone of just some almost kind of pop rock type appeal. It's just like pop rock just in like a trap sense, I'd say. So some good type of appeals going to get some of that. So it does have the appeal behind it, despite the fact that The Box is the biggest song on here and got over a couple billion plays on Spotify. I feel like there's a lot of songs on here that have a lot of appeal. So this is a popular album. This is pretty balanced and just overall continues to be pop. But it feels like yesteryear in certain senses just because it's not as commonly talked about nowadays, but it definitely had its lion's share of appeal back in like 2020, 2021 and stuff, I'd have to say. But just within the appeal. So hopefully folks are not forgetting about Roddy Ricch too quickly, I'd have to say, because I definitely think he can continue to tear things up. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, so there were 5 singles off this project, just to be able to say that. So this is as far as talking about here. So the first single was Big Stepper, and this is one of those acoustic type ones I was talking about. This is like a very dope glaze, kind of a acoustic evening slog to kind of get here, smoke a nice one, ruminate a bit, I'd say, within the tone behind it, just a mellow kind of cruise around just within those fairs. So the basic appeal about it is Big Stepper sounds pretty similar to Tiptoe as far as those pitches kind of have with it. Just some good type of appeal, just some good nice stretching type ones kind of have within those aspects. Just really like the gloss of these particular type songs. Interesting kind of point of view for some of these type fairs. This was kind of relatively new around this particular time just because it was kind of like acoustic type fair just within a glaze and just kind of more evening dress. Something that post grunge would kind of almost do just in more acoustic type sense just within the fair behind it. I would definitely say it has some good type of just overall aspect that just has like its flavor towards it. It's really nailed that particular vibe. Good type pitch. Very original factor about it. Start With Me is the second single, and this is another nice one here. This kind of reminds me of Young Thug and Gunna, some of those type folks. Gunna's on this particular song, so it's good type fair for that. It's like a Middle Eastern kind of smoke a couple song kind of get here. Just some headshot type music, I would definitely feel like. Man cave. It's definitely like some man cave kind of hangout banter, I would say, just in particular. And it's like some basic gap to kind of get here. It's basic kind of dap, poundage, as far as those pitches kind of have with it. PlayStation music, that type fair, movies on, Pulp Fiction, some of those type ones that I'd say just within the tone behind it. Just really has the aspect of being able to have some of those type fairs. Good type tone with like that extra typeness, just be able to get real smoke power powwow type appeal. Just a little bit more indoor bass that has, say, not really backyard type fare, but just within the concept of just having, weed rolled out on the coffee table, some pitches like that, pizza boxes everywhere, some of that type fare, hard leg, or some of that type of good stuff to kind of get. Good type of appeal. Tiptoes, the third single. This is another one that's just like some of that classic kind of dark acoustic appeal, just like Big Stepper. Really appreciate the vibes of these. It's like a stretching kind of dark acoustic traverse to kind of get here. Just some sunset gaze, kind of deeper thought type tones here. Definitely an aspect behind that. And it's like a rock version of like the Lil Baby type songs that he kind of does on like his at least 2017 mixtapes. This might be on more Lil Baby projects, but I only really know his 2017 stuff at this point. But definitely a bop to kind of get here within those particular tones. It's some good type of appeal for it. So this is what I was talking about with some of that pop rap type appeal that just nails that particular aspect as far as being able to say. It just nails the aspect of being able to say just within the pitch of having, so then having the pitch of nailing like the widespread appeal as far as those aspects kind of happen with it. So the thing about Tiptoes, Roddy Ricch was on a particular hit song in early 2020 called Rockstar, which was a song that he did with DaBaby, and that kind of has like similar appeals to like Rockstar, although Rockstar is a little bit more summery, a little bit more TikTok oriented, more pop rap type appeal. I feel like Tiptoe is just a darker version, like the vibes that almost kind of feel pop rap from Rockstar, just in the pitch, despite the fact that this came out like a good 3 or 4 or 5 months before that particular song came out, but has similarities to it. Some good type of this late 2010s, early 2020s type embrace. And yeah, this is a pretty still contemporary type album. I mean, I feel like in some cases it might be seen as yesteryear nowadays, considering that it's almost 2025, or at least that's when I'm reviewing this, is December. So I just had to say within the tone behind it, but some good overall appeals. The Popular, The Boxes, the fourth single. Now this is like a classic kind of COVID era trap cruise around to kind of get here. Just a simplistic bump and like some midnight creeping, I would definitely feel like here. Definitely good for some after hours errands to kind of get. This works great for like some winter type commerce just within the pitch behind it. This should basically, for most folks that kind of remember this particular song, it should pretty much take you back to just like that icy kind of era of like when COVID first happened, some of those type pitches, some of that type for just the aspects behind it back when Pop Smoke and Travis Scott were super huge. Travis Scott is still huge today, but just those moments when Pop Smoke and Travis Scott were trading songs out, and Don Tolliver and those type folks, just in particular some of those type pitches behind it, Gunna, Young Thug, all those type folks that were kind of popping around that particular time, DaBaby, Lil Baby, real type appeals for some of that. Just classic. This is pretty much, I would say this has to be, like, I think when we get to like 2030 and we reflect on the 2020s, this is definitely going to be one of those that's probably going to be seen as like a song of the decade. I definitely think that continues. I mean, this song basically was released as a single. I mean, it said, Wikipedia says it came out in January 2020, but either you can either think of it as December 2019 or January 2020, but basically the concept of just the initial moments of kicking off this decade, this was a big deal of a song. This was number one for a good while, one of the bigger songs out of 2020, so it's a good type of appeal, continues to be a notable hit. High Fashion is the fifth single. Now this is a nice one here. This is like a graceful kind of Kanye West like out in like city lights type jazz kind of get here. Basically like some mellow lounge music, I'd have to say, to sip red wine and mingle just within the tone behind it. So I look after the fare behind this particular song here. It's really the concept. This reminds me of something that like Travis Scott would do in a more graceful type sense. A little bit more a Big Sean, definitely Kanye West type fare, just in the pitch behind it. Just the aspect of a little bit more great, a little bit more suited up, just a little bit more suave licked as far as those pitches will kind of have with it, just like the right tone, just having that particular fare, kind of that typical kind of just beleaguered kind of reflection just within the tone of just being able to say, of just the almost like grateful just in the pitch, with just kind of the emphaticness of that particular beaminess of just about it's this relative type of this smarm type feel, I'd have to say. So, real nice one. But that's the single. So, yeah, this album got to the fifth single, which is not super common. That it seems like albums nowadays kind of do that. This is actually an album that had a relative support system about it, which at least for 2019, 2020, that was a pretty big deal. When I think about it nowadays, I feel like this was not necessarily trite, but just not as much full-blown widespread. But the fact that it did get to the fifth single, I mean, most of these singles, apart from The Box, I remember kind of around this time that some folks were kind of saying that Roddy Ricch was kind of like a one-hit wonder, just because of the popularity of The Box, but the other singles didn't do that terrific. But this is actually more notable just within the fashion behind it. This is actually one of the signature type kickoff albums of this decade, I'd have to suppose, but it's kind of within the tone. I'm kind of losing track of the point I was trying to make here, but just being able to say that it kind of has like some balances of like some good products on this particular album. So basically out of 15 songs on this particular album, I wound up recommending 12 of them. So the only 3 songs I don't recommend on here would just be Perfect Time, God's Eyes, and War Baby. And basically all three of these songs are just more personal, kind of almost gospel-like type songs. It's the same fashion of the problems that I had with Da Baby off of his late 2019 album. I forget what that one's called, but it's either called Kirk or Baby on Baby, one of those type pitches. I think it's called Kirk just within the pitch behind it, but just being able to say when it kind of switches the tone to like a little bit more homely type fashion, I definitely feel like some of these makeshift pop rap type songs work better, but just songs like Perfect Time, God's Eyes, and War Baby are just more kind of ones that are just not as, it's just kind of trap music. And I feel like the concept of like 2010s trap trying to do like a homely type cut, it feels like these are the sorts of directions, paying attention to the Baby and Roddy Ricch and some of these type folks that would kind of go in that direction of just being a little bit more inward and thought-provoking just within the pitch, but it just didn't really nail the concept as full-blown as far as those aspects of being able to have something where it's just not in like crunk type mode and TGIF type step out just within the pitch behind it. But it's not to say that these songs can't be done. I do feel like there's some ones on here like Prayers to the Trap God and Moonwalkin' and Big Stepper and some of those type ones that are not necessarily Friday songs, but just have some great excellent type pitch or just some different rumination on there. But these songs that I don't recommend just didn't pull out that fashion, I would say. So that's within the tone. But yeah, this album gets a 9.75 out of 10. I feel like 12 out of 15 just within the cusp, just behind it. I recommend the intro also, so it's a good type of feel. The only song I'm not going to talk about is just the Elise's skit, I'd have to say. But apart from that, I mean, it's on the verge. I mean, either way you look after it, if I wanted, I could probably say that for the most part, me only not recommending 3 songs normally, I would give that a 10 out of 10. It's just within the pitch, just because of the relative briefness behind it. I mean, either way, 9.75 or a 10. I look after the fact that this is a very impactful album. I guess I probably could give this album a 10 out of 10. I'll go ahead and just say the album's like a 10 out of 10, just based upon the appeal, like the box, having that song having gotten over a couple billion plays on Spotify. It's very notable, very signature albums like the early 2020s. I think this is definitely going to be an album that collects some accolades later if they don't count it as like a 2010s album, I'd have to say, but it really shouldn't, considering it was only around for like a week or so, a week or two in the 2010s. So I just think within the pitch, it probably is a bigger deal. So I'd say the concept of the impact and just looking after just a few years back, being able to say all the damage it did, I definitely think I'd say it's pretty much like a classic in nowadays time. So 10 out of 10. Just being able to talk about some of these. So Moonwalkin' is a nice one. It's like a light lick kind of commute feel. It's kind of Moonwalkin' is some light lick kind of commute, I'd say. It just feels like a darker pop rap. This particular song feels like a darker kind of pop rap cruise around, I'd have to say. Just some simmering kind of ruminate and some good outs to kind of get within that tone. So it's a good, nice tone to have. Lil Durk on this particular song. This really has that particular pitch behind it. Just once again, pretty similar to Big Step or some of these type acoustic type songs that Roddy Ricch nails so perfectly within that. Some of these dark acoustic songs that Roddy Ricch nails so perfectly within the aspect. I'm just trying, I can't really think of too many folks that did this particular style before him. It's just a good aspect, kind of have this particular niche, some good type flares on here, but Moonwalk is a definite another nice one for like some of that glaze kind of makeshift on it. PETA's a nice one though. This has Meek Mill on here. Meek Mill was kind of here and there in 2019. He was really reeling around that particular time from Nipsey Hussle's death, I remember. So he didn't really drop as much. He did drop Championships in late 2018, but he kind of took 2019 off. PETA is kind of like an in-between moments, just kind of frou-frou, but smokage in your system type night as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just looking minty, getting shit done, but just kind of a routine type day. It's kind of within the concept. I said night, but it's just more routine type day, I'd have to say. Well, really, I look after it. Could be day or night just within the pitch of this particular song, Peter. This reminds me of something that Pop Smoke would have done. It's a little bit more of like a graceful type one, just more chandelier-like and just kind of blue blood and type in. Just blue blood and tone as far as those pitches are going to happen with it. Just a little bit more graceful, iced out, having chains. I mean, obviously, if you don't have chains, just something where you look expensive just within the pitch behind it. Nice sound system in your whip, just picking up the times, not necessarily just going to McDonald's or Arby's pitches like that, but actually going, and even if you do go to McDonald's or Arby's, just something where you're actually just having the emphasis of just looking with like the sort of grace that just has a little bit more expensive to the taste of it. It's a pretty good tone to have that in particular. Just some good, graceful type outs and just floats around and cruises around as far as those pitches can happen. Backseat is a nice one here. It's like a day after I was kind of flip mode from like makeshift to like local bass pads. I'd have to say in particular some good concepts for that. It's like a smooth type-ish to kind of get within that tone. This definitely has some radio appeal. So yeah, Ty Dolla $ign is on Backseat. This has some relative. This is kind of like an R&B type song circa like the late 2010s, early 2020s. I'd have to say within the pitch behind it. Kind of the fair where 2010s trap kind of blurs the lines between 2010s R&B trap within that pitch. So Ty Dolla $ign was basically doing that sort of sound. So it's just a good concept of having R&B flavor favorite type one. Roddy Ricch does kind of have like a sing-songy type style. He's definitely pretty similar to Young Thug. I think he's probably like this, the Young Thug variation of like probably 4 or 5, 6 years younger as far as those pitches kind of happen with it, 7 or 8, something like that. It was just kind of the concept. It's the more kind of new era version of Young Thug within the pitch. So good type flares for that. Prayers to the Trap God is a nice one as well. It's another nice, this is like a nice kind of dusky, slow cruise haze kind of get here, I'd have to say. Just typical kind of orange skies day. This would be like a typical kind of orange skies day to kind of have within that pitch. Just some deep thought and good song to toke up to just in the pitch behind it. So there are tons of these songs on here. Big Stepper, Moonwalk, and Backseat in the more R&B type sense. Prayers to the Trap God, some of these type tones with it. There's another one on here like Tiptoe, some of those type ones. So it has a good type of appeal, just like that makeshift kind of embrace. It just like a slog kind of evening, but it's more smoke ready, more so than the tone. Not so much as full blown kind of blue collar type shift. I mean, it has the blue collar type appeal about it, but just within the aspect of this not being quite within square type mode of just settling in, going home, and just watching the news or something like that, but just not just the concept of settling in, going home, and going to sleep for the night as far as those pitches can happen, but actually the aspect of just getting some smoke in your system, maybe picking up some Popeyes, some Burger King, something like that, some good type fare to just kick back and just appreciate the times. I mean, this is really not as much like a homies type project. I kind of look after, maybe it has like a relative tight circle, 2 or 3 or 4 folks as far as those pitches can happen, but I feel like apart from the song The Box, a lot of this basically is a lot of that glaze kind of cruise around. I just look after songs like, I would also say Boom Boom Room is another one that's like that as well. So a lot of these, Boom Boom Room, Prayers to the Trap God, like Moonwalkin', Tiptoe, Big Step, or some of these type ones just really have that relative appeal. This within like that relative commerce. This is a pretty car-centric, vehicle-centric type cruise around within the pitch, which is excellent type concepts kind of get within that tone. But me looking, I actually have realized, and I want to say that for the most part, it didn't seem like, well, yeah, I think Roddy Ricch was over 21 around this time, so it's within that pitch that but he doesn't really have like the dance club or the nightclub kind of steppers. I feel like The Box is definitely one of those, but for the most part, there's not really like the crunchy kind of club, just stand on couches, really get some champagne in your system, shit like that, I'd have to say, just within the tone. But a nice cruise around type one to kind of get in like a floaty sense to be rolled dice. It's like a woozy kind of floaty trap in between, I'd have to say here. It just reminds me of Young Thug, definitely, and this like some sparkly kind of cruise around, and this has some mega thump about it. This is relatively close to The Box, not quite as emphatic and quite as, distinct lightning in a bottle within the pitch, but it's definitely just like one of those type ones that just has a good sound system just to pick up and just kind of appreciate like some cruise rounds within the fare behind it. Nice breathy type beat on there, I'd have to say. Intro is a pretty nice one. I don't know if I talked about this one, but this is a good type of appeal. It's like a dark version of like a homely embrace that you would kind of get. It's something like, it feels like out of like a 90s family movie, something like that, but just with a little bit more wintry bite about it, just in like a trap sense. It's like a real talk song, I would definitely feel like here. Standard commute and just thoughts to kind of have extra thoughts on this particular song. Just a good song to gaze to just within the pitch. Just peer into like the sunset skies pitch, just like that. Smoke a nice L, something within that relative type tone. Just be near your vehicle, just in a parking lot, just extra thoughts kind of have just within the pitch, figuring out what's going to happen. Real nice concept kind of get within that fare. Boom Boom Room is a nice one as well. It's like a great malaise kind of acoustic simmer to kind of get here. Pairs great with Moonwalk and Big Step, or some of those type ones I'd have to say, and it's like some great work relief to kind of have. So like I was saying, this is another stock one of those just within the pitch behind it. As far as those pitch kind of happen, it's very similar to like the lead single Big Stepper and another big single off this album, Tiptoe, just in the fashion. So some good type of appeals. It really nails that kind of evening. It really nails that evening kind of sunset glaze glimmer as far as those pitches kind of happen with a good type tone. So yeah, that's the concept about this sound. So it is going to get a 10 out of 10, like I was saying. So that's the concept about the sound. So it is going to get a 10 out of 10, like I was saying. Some good type pitches kind of be able to have that. Excellent type fare. The social score, I would probably say I would give the social score a 10, just because this is an impactful type album. But I look after the tone. I do feel like the concept about it does have like the car rumblers on here for some nice cruise around, some good pitches to impress some bass, some pitches like that just within the tone. But in terms of like the actual frenetic moments, in terms of something that's going to get like the things popping, some pitches like that, get the twerking started, some of that type fare, some Instagram flashes, some good type pizzazz to get the excitement going. Apart from The Box, which really The Box is just kind of more of like some good stunt type music, more so than crazed kind of get carnivorous type music. It really feels like Roddy Ricch is not really as full-blown crazy on here. I mean, at least Pop Smoke would have some of those drill type moments. I think this album probably needed something desperately like something like drill, but this is just a lot more just vehicle thump, sunset glaze and just pitches like that within the tone, but it doesn't really have like a nightclub smash, something like that, or just like an overall pop off, get hella turned up. I mean, you definitely do get a little bit tore up on this product, but it's just more in moderation to like the aspect it is being amongst like the product of the day more so than the concept of actually designating towards it. So it's just within the pitch. So I think the social score will get a 9 out of 10, just a solid 9. I'd have to say within the pitch. 5 singles, like I said, this is a very notable album out of the 2020s. I think this is very impactful, one of the more seminal type ones, especially out of trap music and rap in general. I'd have to say it was just within the pitch, just lacks like a club smash, something like that. So just within the pitch, I do feel like the seminalness of this project is to be noted. So in terms of the future, like Roddy Ricch is supposedly working on his next project called the Navy album. We'll have to see what happens with that. But there's at least one more album to get to, and there might be some EPs and mixtapes, some of that type. I'll have to see some other type stuff of this to see what other big hits he kind of has. It's within the aspect of it. But this is definitely like this is a classic out of the 2020s. So I'd say easily notable to kind of see that.